Now that we've gone through what the Model Lighting Ordinance overview is and how to apply it, we thought that we would actually show you a specific example. And this example is a tough one. It's going to be a service station in Lighting Zone 1, which, as you now know, is either residential or a very small town, rural town that has decided we are only lighting Zone 1. So with that, we'll see of how the design actually goes through the Model Lighting Ordinance on this pretty restrictive type of application. We're going to look at all the different ways that we can apply the Model Lighting Ordinance. We're going to start with the prescriptive method and first see, can we do the parking space method, which is, remember, it's less than 10 parking places. And if that's the case, we would take the number of parking spaces and multiply it with the lumens per parking place. Here's our application. And as you can see, we're way over 10 parking spaces. So we will not be able to use that first prescriptive method. We are forced to look at the other site lumen limit in the prescriptive method. So step one, we actually have to determine how many site lumens we do get. Parking space method does not apply. Prescriptive hardscape area using table B does apply. We'll look at the total site lumens and we'll begin with the base allowance. In the base allowance in Lighting Zone 1, we're allowed 1.25 lumens per square foot of hardscape. And if you remember, this hardscape does not include the building footprint. In addition to that base case, which are tradable lumens, we're given a couple other things. One is vehicle service stations, and we're allowed additional lumens per the pump aisle. So if we look at that and we multiply, here's the whole hardscape that we have, and we multiply that by the 1.25 lumens per square foot, we come up with a 43,000 plus lumen allowance. Remember, these are tradable. In addition to that, we have 24 pump faces, so we're allowed 4,000 lumens per pump face. For 96,000 lumens that are allowed, and these are non-tradable. These are the use it or lose it. We can only use them for the pump surface areas. But with those two, we would add them up in total lumens of 139,000 plus. Going further, now we actually look at the design itself. We have the different luminaires, and each luminaire has a lumen limit per luminaire. And this you would get from the manufacturer or their photometric files. We've added up the number of luminaires, multiplied it by the lumens of each one, and have a total initial lumens. And our initial lumens is 277,000. These exceed what this allowance has stated for Lighting Zone 1. So, time to redesign. We do redesign it by actually lowering the lumen allowance or lowering the lumen limit of some of the luminaires to redesign, and we come down to 114,000 plus lumens, which meets the total site allowance. But remember, some of these were non-tradable. So we have to go back and make that check to make sure that our non-tradable ones do meet the limit. And when we look at the non-tradable, we had 96,000 lumens, but when we added up all the lights under the canopy, they added to 104,000 plus lumens. Therefore, we have definitely exceeded it by 8,976. Ooh, we better go back to our tradable lumens and see if we can round up a little less than 9,000 lumens to apply to the canopy lighting. And with that, yes, we're able to do that. We're able to round up 9,800 lumens from the tradable applications. So therefore, we meet the tradable limit. So once we've done the lighting, in other words, how many lumens per site, now let's check the limits to the off-site impacts or the bug ratings. This is the photometric characteristics of every single luminaire on the site. When we look at the different bug ratings, we first have to decide of what their setback is, the A, B, C, and D luminaires. All of them are ideally low oriented except for the D luminaire. And I'm going to go back a slide to show you those D luminaires. They are right on facing the property line and they're on the building. So you can see that those two luminaires are not properly oriented. But with that, we can look at the different types of ratings. And if they're greater than 2 mounting heights, like the A and the C are, they can be a B3 rating. And we look at the limit itself, and we can see that, yes, all of those comply with that particular rating. So, little bit of summary here. You have to check whether they're ideally oriented. And if not, look at the tables depending on what the description are for the backlight ratings. The backlight is going to be the hardest to comply with because you've got those double checks on how close they are to the property line and if they're ideally oriented or not. The U ratings are a heck of a lot easier because here they kind of follow the lighting zones themselves. U0 through U4. And most of them, they're all ideally located except for the D, not quite ideally located, but that doesn't matter with the U rating at all. Does it comply? Yes, because here's what the U ratings are and here's what the limits are. They allow, because we're in lighting zone 1, that we can go up to U1. And the ratings for the luminaires themselves are either U0 or U1. So yes, all the U's comply. The final one to actually check are the G ratings. And here's what the luminaires display in their photometric data. Also their mounting heights and whether they're ideally located or not. And in that, we are allowed a G1 rating unless it's not ideally located, and that was that D luminaire that was pointing straight to the property line. With that, because we've got a G0 rating for the D, that's exactly what it asks for a non-ideally located, so everything does comply. So in summary, we've looked at how much light is on it, and we are required, because we're over 10 parking spaces, to go to the hardscape area method. It only required one design, or one redesign, which means we had to lower the lumen rating of a particular luminaire type. We did look at the offsite impacts, and yes, the way that they were located and distance from the property lines, they all complied with the bug limits. Now, if we took that same example and did the performance method, we basically go through a similar path as prescriptive. Look that the performance hardscape area has a base with tradable and special use. And the special use are non-tradable areas. Then as we go down, we've got two different paths. We can repeat the bug ratings like we just did, or we can put it through the computer modeling to see if the vertical illuminance escaping the site is less than 15% total of the site lumen limit. This particular one is a lot more complicated and involves computer programming. So when we go into this particular one, we can see it's our same site. We're looking at everything exactly the same. And we've got the performance method. We'll first look at the total site lumens. Again, very similar to the prescriptive method. And then if we need additional allowances, we can do those. With its total site lumens per square foot, we look at, we're lighting zone 1, so we're at that 1.25. And in the performance, we get that extra initial lumens just as a little increase to begin with. With that, we multiply our total site lumens to our square footage, to the lumen limit, and we come up with 46,000 plus lumens that were allowed. Now, because we're a gas station, we get a few extra items that we can apply to it. We've decided to look on, again, use it or lose it, non-tradable, once used allowances for building entrances or exits. Also for the hardscape area of the vehicle service area, and then for the canopy. And those are extra use it or lose it allowances in the performance. And here just shows an example of how to go through which one. There are 5 entry doors, so we get some like there. We get canopy area and hardscape area for a total of 226,650 total lumens, tradable and non-tradable. So step 1, we'll go through all of the lights on the site, similar to what we did in the prescriptive method, and multiply them by the base case. And by going this method, yes, it meets the allowance. But this excess allowance cannot be used anywhere elsewhere on the site because this is only for the entry doors. The hardscape area, we go through the whole area, similar to what we did in the prescriptive, but these are use it or lose it, and it meets the allowance. But we can't use the excess anywhere, and then we go through the same exercise with the canopy, with the same results that it meets the allowance. So with the performance hardscape area, the tradable lumens, we are looking at multiplying all of these areas against the tradable site limit, and we're allowed 46,886. And we notice that one of the luminaires is applied to non-tradable only. So it meets the allowance. Second thing, we have 2 different ways of going through the performance method to look for offsite impacts. And we can either go the bug ratings or doing the computer modeling with the light escaping the site. Here just shows an example of what the computer modeling would look like. And you would take into account the building, the hardscape reflectances, the building surface, and all of its surface reflectances within it to see of where that is. And with that computer modeling, we have found out that yes, we do have less than 15% of all of these lumens that have less than 15% escapes the site. So we do meet the requirement. And in our glass box, no single point is exceeding 0.1 foot candles. So this performance method, as you can see, is a lot more complicated than the simple prescriptive method. Many cities and communities will not really want to venture into the performance method. And what we have found is that more communities may use this only in a special case. Maybe it's a special review, but not putting it out as part of their ordinance. And as more performance method calculations are done, this is a living document, and the values will be adjusted as more feedback comes back on the performance method. So let's look at some typical luminaires on where they may apply, just so you can start getting a feeling on some of the luminaires that you're used to in your cities. A 250 watt high pure sodium flat lens. Really, this type of luminaire is only allowed in LZ3 and LZ4. This favorite 155 watt or 150 watt SAG lens only applied in LZ4. And the ubiquitous barn light, notice, fails in all zones. What we're hoping is that designers will start going to more fully shielded and not having luminaires with high glare and a lot of uplight. This is the exciting part of this particular ordinance. Let's look at other typical luminaires. You may go, well, what will work in lighting zone 0? One analysis is this fully shielded 26 watt compact fluorescent has a bug 0 all the way across the board, and ideal for lighting zone 0. That's near property lines. If you're away from a property line, then you're allowed a little bit more latitude in the backlight and up to a B1. And you notice the only difference, they're still fully shielded, but the wattages go up from 26 watts up to 42 watts with a compact fluorescent. In lighting zone 2, here's some examples of areas and luminaires that will meet most of the lighting zone 2 requirements. Everywhere from 100 watt high pressure sodium to 40 watt LED. It all depends on the distribution. You can't just blanketly say, oh, 100 watt high pressure sodium will meet it. You have to look at the photometric data, get the information from the luminaire manufacturer, the cut sheet, or you are welcome to calculate the bug ratings on your own with a photometric data in IES format and some of the free programs that are available to do this. So here's some typical luminaires for lighting zone 3. The only big difference is that the wattage or the light output starts increasing. And once you begin to work with different luminaire types, you'll begin to understand the different bug ratings for the different types of luminaires. So what we've been talking about so far has only been for commercial applications. In residential, we have decided to take a whole different route because we're not going to have hardscape. A lot of residential properties have very little hardscape. They only have a driveway, and yet they do have a lot of property or land, especially in rural areas, or very little property or land in urban areas. So to make it easier, we've decided to just give lumens per luminaire or per lighting fixture. And you can see on these row 1, we have for the luminaire may be unshielded at 1 entry only. And depending on the lighting zone, and again, lighting zone 1 seems to be the most applicable for residential area. And you go through the different rows depending on what they are. We've got landscape lighting, a directional floodlight. And notice directional floodlights are not allowed in lighting zone 0 or 1. You have to be at a much higher lighting zone in order for those to even be applied. I'm going to go through a quick residential example just to show you of how to apply it. We've got the different luminaire types, and I've tried to color code them so that luminaire A is in red, and it's red on the little luminaire schedule. This one is the only one that's kind of unshielded. It's a decorative wall sconce, and we can see that it's a 9 watt compact fluorescent, really low wattage. And in row 1, we're allowed 420 lumens for 1 light, and that's exactly what this particular 9 watt CFL does. Then we go through and we add up The B lights, which is on the garage, and then there's a sconce or a little post light out by the entry. Then we've got a light at the back entry and then one on the shed. Add all of those up or look at each one individually. And that's how we determine whether you've met the MLO or not. It is not based on how many lumens per site. We're doing it per piece of equipment, which was a lot easier to do with a residential property. You can go to your hardware store when you buy your light. On each light, it will have a lumen rating on it and much easier to comply with. Remember I told you that there was a street lighting option? A lot of communities may decide that our street lights in a lighting zone 1 area are going to comply with lighting zone 1. The only difference is that all light has to be 0 above 90 degrees, which is U0. The exception to that may be if you have decorative street lighting. Then we're recommending special permit only. And that is to allow the neighborhood and the community to have some influence on whether they want it. If you do allow decorative, then notice doesn't this look familiar? That the U values match the lighting zone values, similar to the private property. So this is a street lighting option that many communities are deciding to implement to be in partnership with their communities. So, is there going to be any impact when we finally go to the Model Lighting Ordinance? This was an assessment of all outdoor lighting in the state of California, and we basically found out that 48% of the lights were big glowing lights or non-cutoff. And the fully shielded ones, which was the old full cutoff, or the U0, that there were only 33% of those. So the impact is huge. We need communities to adopt the Model Lighting Ordinance and to start protecting the night sky, stopping neighbor-to-neighbor complaints, and getting cohesive looking communities so that one area is not lighted more than another. There's a lot of additional steps for the MLO. In the new version 4 of the LEED compliance path for Site Credit 8, the MLO is one method that you can use in order to comply. We really need to encourage communities to adopt it. And through seminars, webinars like this, the education of the city planners. This is definitely a living document. We want to hear back from you on what's going on. Additional information, the International Dark Sky Association offers education to city planners and to work with cities when they are implementing the Model Lighting Ordinance, or even just looking at how do we apply it to our own regulations? How do we look at the lighting zones and put them over our zone maps, our regulation mapping? The International Dark Sky Association has a team of experts ready to come and support the different cities. Now, we do have a lot on our wish list. We're hoping for feedback on the Model Lighting Ordinance because this is a living document. If the performance method needs to be adjusted, we need to hear back. And then the one big wish list is going to be electronic signs. Many of the cities are seeing the influx of LED signs coming in and trying to get a handle on the brightness of those, how often they change their message is going to be crucial for communities. So in further editions of the Model Lighting Ordinance, there will be a section on signs. And then eventually, we may even down the future start looking at the color of light. Should we change the color over the course of the evening to start better filtering in our circadian rhythm or what communities want? Some communities may want a really warm color and others may want a little bit more of a neutral color. which would be similar to what the moon is. Well, thank you very much for being our audience tonight or today for the Model Lighting Ordinance and for looking at the IES-TM 15, which is the Outdoor Lighting Classification System. We really appreciate it, and we're hoping for your questions. Thank you very much.